Hey everyone, welcome to the Random Redshirt podcast. I am Zach, one of the hosts, and the other host with me as always is Chris. What's going on, Chris?
Hello, Zach. Hello, everyone. Always great to be here. And we are having so much fun doing this podcast and sharing it with everyone around the world. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and being part of it and enjoying what we love to talk about. So, yeah, Zach, how have you been?
Good man. I've been busy, 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 busy. Did I mention busy? What about how about you? I know you've been traveling a lot and you've been busy too. So
Yeah, yeah. Work travel, um, yeah, keeping me like very busy, my schedule full. But I'm grateful to be able to see the places I get to see and be
yeah.
here and talk with you and enjoy this together. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely need a respite away from the job and everything else, right?
Yeah.
And it's great too because we get to come on here and talk about what we enjoy, which is science fiction and Star Trek and everything in between. And if this is your first time watching the Random Redshirt podcast, we thank you so much for tuning in all over the globe. If you haven't yet, be sure to go on Instagram and Facebook and check us out there. You can find our podcast on any of the podcast platforms. If you're listening to us, you probably have figured that out. We're also on YouTube. If you're watching us, you know that as well. But we have a YouTube channel, and we appreciate you watching. If you've been a part of that and our fast growing YouTube channel, we have tons of great episodes that you can go back and watch. Whether it's been our Picard season 3 review or our great celebrity guest interviews, which, if you're watching this episode, that means that the Elizabeth Dennehy interview has been out. And so we highly recommend, if you have not watched that, to go back and watch or listen to that interview because it was absolutely fantastic. We really had a blast talking with her, a lot of fun, and we really enjoyed our time.
Yeah, we learned a lot. So,
We also
yeah,
learned that IMDb lies. She's not was not in Total Recall, which kind of, I mean, when I was doing some research on my end, Chris, and I was filling out some of this stuff, I was like, I don't remember her in Total Recall.
right.
I didn't remember her
Yeah.
seeing her there, so I don't know. I guess I just didn't catch that. But
Yeah.
anyways, IMDb is a liar. That's the one of the things I knew for sure. And this series of movies that she's going to be doing with Kevin Costner
Oh,
sounds
yeah.
really fascinating. She's going to be an Irish woman, and with Michael Rooker from many things to include Walking Dead and Guardians of the Galaxy, and tons of other stuff as well. So we look forward to seeing those movies of her with Kevin Costner, which will be fantastic. So
Yeah. Yeah. It blew your mind too with that relationship and connection with Cole Meany. That was pretty,
yeah.
yeah.
Her husband's like they're real good family
Wow.
friends with Colomini, and I almost had an aneurysm. Um, but it was I was in a bit of deja vu there, not deja vu. I was in a bit of just kind of awe that I was like, wow, that's so awesome that they have that connection, which is great. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so we've gotten some feedback from listeners and viewers of the podcast that said, hey, we like your deep dives and we loved your review and deep dives of Picard season 3 so much that we want more, right? We want to see more deep dives of Star Trek episodes. And so we're going to do that. And this is our very first one. And so Chris had this great idea of, hey, why don't we start out and do these spotlight episodes, which is this is what it's titled, where we go through and we look at look at the different mirror universe episodes in Star Trek. And we've got several to choose from, obviously. And we've said, hey, let's just go in order, right? DS9's got a couple. Enterprise has a couple. TOS has, of course, the original one, which we're going to look at Mirror Mirror here in this episode. And Discovery has some as well. So we're going to go through those. We're going to talk about them, do a deep dive into that, and give you our thoughts, just like we have with Picard season 3, as well as what we'll be doing with Strange New World season 2 coming up. And yeah, I'm pretty excited about this, Chris, because the mirror episodes are always fan favorites.
They are. They are. And they're really interesting and they're cool because you get to see a different dimension and a different aspect of a character that you're maybe familiar with, right? And we'll talk
Yeah.
about that during this episode too. But throughout all of the Star Trek episodes where we encountered the mirror universe, we just get these really, really colorful and creative interpretations of what their characters are. When we either think of Spock or Kirk or even Captain Cisco, Captain Cisco one was like fantastic.
Yeah.
That was a very very colorful one. And then the different take on the relationships amongst the characters that we well know and love. That's always like great to see in these mirror universe episodes.
Season 5 we know is just going to be so jam packed full of great things, and we thought, what a better time to start this than in season 5, right here on the Random Redshirt podcast. So we're excited to do this. We're looking forward to it. We hope that you enjoy these deep dive looks, and we're doing a little deep dive series, a little spotlight series. And the first up in the spotlight series is our look at this mirror universe. And it's very interesting, Chris, because this one particular episode of Star Trek in the original series entitled Mirror Mirror, which we're going to talk about, really spurred a whole slew of episodes, and it created this alternate universe, this mirror universe that we've really come to enjoy throughout the Star Trek franchise.
It sure has throughout Star Trek. And one of the things that I like about it is this innovative and a risky idea, a little bit of a risky idea, right? Because you're in a series and you're in the middle of a series where people are familiar, they know what's going on. Then you always have the risk of, if you introduce this idea of a mirror universe, then do you confuse and do you lose the audience for them going forward? But in Mirror Mirror, that didn't happen. I think it is one of the well loved, very well loved TOS episodes that we have. And I like it so much because not only does it affect so much of Star Trek that came after it, but I think it had a very, very good influence. Whether people consciously remember the influence or not, on so much of some great science fiction that came after. If people are familiar with the great show Fringe that came after that dealt with right, that was a parallel universe. There were some cool movies that came after that. There was Another Earth that dealt with a parallel universe. You have all of these great scientific minds in our community, astrophysicists and cosmologists, that talk about the idea of parallel universes and parallel dimensions, and the possible, at least the theoretical possibility of them existing, which I think is great. And then if you're into Marvel and DC, which we are, Marvel and DC have these just huge, expansive multiverses that are there, right?
Yep.
So, and I think that's so great that here we have Mirror Mirror from TOS, that I don't remember. Maybe there was something before that, but I don't remember something as popular that dealt with a mirror universe. And now we've got all of this kind of great science fiction that deals with mirror universes after that. I think how cool, because you just get to see this different perspectives on so many different characters, and a little bit of like a scientific kind of background and basis and the foundation for that to be able to happen. So yeah,
yeah. If
yeah,
I remember correctly, Chris, the last time I read up on it, in real life, scientists, I believe there's some conjecture, and there are some, there's quite a few actually, that believe that there's an infinite number of parallel universes, right? That,
yeah,
if you think about it, okay, so you're going through life and you make this decision, that in one instance you make this decision that leads to you meeting somebody, right? Maybe it becomes like a best friend or spouse or whatever. And in another one, you branch off over here. Well, you don't go make that decision. Therefore, you don't meet those people. And then it spurs this whole other thing. And it's like every time you're making some type of choice, there's a universe where you do and a universe where you don't. And I've kind of read on some of this stuff, and it's very fascinating. You're thinking to yourself, there could be an alternate universe out there, Chris, or a mirror universe out there where you and I both have mullets and goatees, and we're not podcast hosts, and we're just living on a beach somewhere. Like, I mean, who knows? Right? The possibilities are endless, right? The mirror universe and the alternate universe, multiverse. I mean, it's really, it can mess with your brain a little bit, for sure.
yeah.
But this idea, this episode in particular, Mirror Mirror, I think certainly was was kind of ahead of its time, right? With this
Yeah.
concept, this idea that there was a doppelganger of these characters in another universe, but they're also very different, right? I mean, the Kirk and Spock and everything in the mirror universe and TOS are vastly different than the ones that we have come to know over the course of the series and obviously throughout the franchise.
Yeah. And I think we'll jump around a little bit in this episode, and we'll jump around a little bit in the different themes and ideas. And I think that's okay if you're okay
Yeah.
with that too, Zach. Yeah. I was reading a little bit about this episode and how it came to be and the writers of the episode. And I think you and I talked, Zach, and this was the teleplay, and the original idea came from a science fiction writer named Jerome Bixby, and then it went through some series of different iterations. I think DC Fontana was
Yep.
involved in
Yep.
changing it, and I want to
And
say maybe
Gene
Gene
Kuhn, I
Kuhn.
think, had the final edit or final revision of the teleplay.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's right. And some of the original ideas, where it was just going to be Kirk that went to the mirror universe, and then that was expanded to be more of the crew that went to the mirror universe. It ended up being Kirk, Uhura, Scotty, and McCoy that ended up beaming accidentally into the mirror universe. And I think that was a good choice,
Yeah.
because then you've got multiple of them. Um,
Yeah, I think it
mhm,
added a lot more to it,
yeah,
right? It filled in the episode more, I feel like. And I think if it had only been Kirk, I think it would have really limited, some of the stuff that they could have done. And therefore, maybe it may not have been as good as it was.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Some of the ideas and themes that they wanted to explore that I know about is the idea of what would it be like if these same characters grew up and developed in kind of a fascist regime, right? So extrapolating from our own world, we've got all of our developing countries, and some are great democracies, and some are fascist regimes, and then you're kind of
And
developing,
authoritarian
yeah,
and
authoritarian.
dictatorships and all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, and people grow up in that atmosphere, and then how do they develop? What kind of people that they become. Um, and so that's a very kind of an interesting like idea in this type of episode, because um, if you take Kirk, or if you take Kirk as a child, and he grew up in these different environments, would the same Kirk end up being as kind of vicious and savage as he was in the Terran Empire universe? So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's true.
yeah,
Yeah. So, okay, before we dive in and really get in this episode
yeah,
and go through it, let's just do a really quick need to know
yeah.
for this week, and we'll talk about just a couple of things that were on our mind for this week that we think you need to know, hence the name, and then we'll jump into this. So, Chris, what's the first thing our audience needs to know this week as of May 20th, 2023?
Yes, I wanted to plug this book. Thank you, Zach, that I had been reading. And if people like black holes, there's a book from Jen 11. She's a great scientist, and so this is, what is it? The Black Hole Survival Guide. So if you want to,
Wait, you're reading the book and you're like, wait, what is
yeah,
this?
what is
What's
it?
the title?
So it's a fast, and it's a very, very enjoyable read, and I think she is a wonderful writer. And she just gives a really great like take on, hey, if you encounter a black hole, what are you going to expect? So
Do we
enjoy.
expect what happened to Matthew McConaughey in Interstellar, where he travels down through the black hole and ends up in this weird 4D like dimensional thing and knocking books off shelves for his younger daughter?
Is it okay if I nerd out for well, where I'm already
What
nerded out?
it's I was gonna say, Chris, this is our podcast. We nerd out every time. What are you talking? Of course, it's okay to nerd out.
Yeah, I was totally thinking about the Matthew McConaughey like travel in the black hole when I was reading that. Um, because they don't know like what is at the end of the singularity, right? Is it just, are you going out into another dimension, or do you come out a white hole? Um, it's very, very interesting. But what I was thinking about is like when Matthew McConaughey, when he goes in, he's seeing all these this light is coming in. There's a lot of brightness, and so when I was reading Jen 11's work, she describes it like as you fall into the singularity, all of the light kind of gets funneled that you're seeing from outside the black hole. So it's just all this white light that you'll eventually see when you're coming in. So you're
Mm.
going down a tunnel and you're seeing white light. And as she was describing that, I was totally thinking about Matthew McConaughey. So that was great.
Supposedly, and I've seen Interstellar. I'm sure
Yeah,
you have too.
yeah,
I've seen. I very much enjoy the movie. It can be hard to watch as a parent when you're seeing him watch those videos as his kids have gotten older. You know, and the whole
mhm,
thing idea of time dilation and so forth. Um, but the movie's very fascinating. Supposedly it's supposed to be the most scientifically accurate depiction of a black hole.
yeah,
Now, as far as like the other stuff, it's Hollywood in there, right? With them, who knows? Nobody really knows. I mean, all the theories and stuff I've read about black holes is that you get stretched out like a spaghetti noodle to the point where you're just it kills you. You don't survive and go and knock books off bookshelves and things like that. But yeah, very. I mean, imagine that happening to you and you falling through that. You're in some spacesuit and falling. Like how just utterly alone and eerie and just crazy that would be. Just it's a bit unsettling to even think about sometimes. But
yeah.
anyways, yeah,
You're right on Interstellar being. I think they had a famous astrophysicist help with the advisement of it, Kip Thorne, on Interstellar. So if I'm wrong on that, someone please let me know. But yeah, they did make it as accurate as they could.
yeah,
Maybe it'll be a little while before we fall into a black hole. You know.
yeah. I mean, we're getting older, but I don't think we're gonna be that old.
So what else do we need to know on your
Well, so if you haven't seen it yet, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is out in theaters. I have not seen it yet. I have heard very, very good things about it. A lot of people raving about the movie. There's few moments in the movie that are hard to watch. From my understanding, without really spoiling too much, because I think it's been mentioned enough out there that there is some animal cruelty in the movie, and there are a couple of moments where they say it's PG-13, but there are a couple moments where they say, yeah, you might want to consider not taking young kids to see it because of these things. So I don't know if I'm gonna go take my kids to see it because they really want to see it, but some of those moments in there, maybe this is just not. Maybe I need to watch it first and
Yeah,
screen it myself before I say, yeah, this is okay versus, I know what you've watched before versus no, this isn't. This is, you need to wait till a little bit older to see it, unfortunately.
I've,
But
yeah,
I've heard a lot of very good things about it from people. Some people have said it's their favorite in the trilogy. Others have said, it's the first one's their favorite and this one's number two and so forth. So I am looking forward to seeing it though. Both the Guardians movies have been good, and I've heard that this one's just as good. So
is this going to be the last one? Do you think?
my understanding is yes, this is the last Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Okay.
Whether they pop up in other Marvel movies, who knows? But as far as their own movies, this is supposed to be the last one. Of course, we've heard these promises before, have we not, Chris, from Disney? We're
That's
like,
right.
oh, this is going to be a 6-episode limited series. And then, oh, nope, just kidding. We're doing another season or whatever. So
Yeah,
they say it's the last one, but we'll see it when we believe it because, money talks, right? And if they make a boatload of money off this movie, they may go, well, just kidding. We're going to make another one.
for
So
sure.
I guess we'll see what happens. But all right, Chris, what's the last thing our audience needs to know this week?
So I believe we talked a little bit about this last week too, but the Flash, I forget if it's called Flashpoint. It's the Flash movie.
Yeah,
It's
Flash movie.
coming out soon again.
Next month, right?
Next month, right?
June, yeah.
Yeah. I know that some people had advanced viewings of it. I know that Stephen King had an advanced viewing of it, and he had some very, very positive things to say about it. But this is one that I want to see in the theater because of Batman. So,
It's not
yeah,
because of the Flash. It's because of Michael Keaton's Batman.
that's
I mean,
right.
come on.
Yeah. So,
We all know why people are going to see this movie. They're not going to see it because of Ezra Miller, I think is his name, right? As
yeah,
Flash. They're going to see it because Keaton's back within the cowl. I mean, come on.
yeah. So, looking forward to that. So, I'm hoping you and we both get to see it, Zach, and then we can come back and we can talk about it, and
Yeah,
because that'll be lovely to talk about it and share
for
our
sure.
experience. Yeah.
Especially because I'm sure we're all going to be both going to be hyped up after seeing Michael Keaton in action,
Yeah.
right? I mean, after all these years, I mean, the last time we saw him in the cowl was in, what was it, 91? in Batman
One, two,
Returns.
yeah.
192 in Batman Returns. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do this. Ladies and gentlemen, Random Red Shirt podcast listeners and watchers, welcome to our very first Star Trek, our very first Spotlight episode. We are entitled Episode 001, Star Trek, the original series Mirror Mirror, where we spotlight an episode of something, in this case, Star Trek, and we are going to talk about the Mirror Universe. This is going to be a little mini series here within a mini series. So it's a mini series within a mini series. If you're following here. Okay.
Yeah.
The spotlight episodes are going to be specific episodes that we feel are important, or ones that you guys have asked for us to go back and do a deep dive. I know there's been several people asking for us to deep dive and do a spotlight episode on Voyager, Year of Hell Part 1 and 2, and we definitely look forward to doing that down the road. But Chris, I love this idea. We talked about this, and we agreed that, yeah, let's do this. Let's look at the Mirror Universe. Let's do a little mini series within a series and look at the Mirror Universe, because it really is a fan favorite thing. And the Mirror Universes is a great way, I think, and I'm sure the actors probably would enjoy it too, where you're the same character over and over and over again. Then all of a sudden you switch it up, and now you get to be this character, but in a different way, right? You're acting them out. You really see that in the DS9 mirrors, because all the characters in the Mirror Universe are almost completely different than they are in the Prime universe. In Star Trek, the original series Mirror episode, the Prime characters are definitely different than the Mirror characters as well. So with that being said, Chris, let's jump into this and let's get into Star Trek, the original series episode Mirror, the thing that started it all.
Mm-hmm. You know what I like about this is it opens up, like it straight opens up like on a planet in the middle of the negotiations that they're having with the race called the Halkans. So you get, and I think I'm saying that name right. But we get Kirk and McCoy and Scotty and Uhura negotiating with the Halkans to be able to get dilithium crystals. We're always looking for more dilithium crystals.
Right.
The Federation. So we get that. And the negotiations are going, fairly well, and it's very polite, it's very cordial. The scene is not like that long, but I think there were some very good kind of things that came like from it. So, Kirk is being very diplomatic and good, asking for the dilithium, but the leader of the Halkans, he recognizes that sounds like Starfleet is a good organization, and they want to do good. But what's interesting is that he recognizes that still there's maybe some potential where the dilithium could get into the wrong hands. And dilithium is, it's a very, very, very powerful element that can cause destruction. And the nature of his race is that, they won't participate in doing harm to anyone. And so therefore they won't give Kirk or the Enterprise or the Federation, dilithium, because as long as there is even the smallest potential of harm coming from that action, they will not do it. And it was interesting because he said, and we'll die, all of us will die to prevent that from happening. So when I think about that from just kind of like a science fiction and philosophical point of view, I thought, oh, that was kind of neat that they put that in there at the beginning, even though, this is a very, very short scene. And yeah. And the leader says to Kirk, he says, Captain, you realize you could force it from us, right? And it was kind of a out of place thing. You realize you could force it from us. And I loved like Kirk turning and goes, yeah, but we would never do that. He says something like that. He goes,
he's like, but we're not going to do that. And he's like, and says something to the effect of like, that should tell you everything you need to know or whatever, right? Like, we have the ability to just take this from you, but we're not. We're trying to do this the right way. We're trying to negotiate from you. We're trying to help ease your mind and let you know that, we're peaceful, we're explorers, and, we want to use this for good. And not bad. And they're very hell bent. We see this time and time again throughout the Star Trek franchise where the starship that is the main character, the crew, the main characters of whatever Star Trek series you're watching will come across at least one time in their show a planet where the entire planet is completely peaceful. They don't fight, they don't murder, they don't do any of these kind of things. They're peaceful. They want to exist. They don't want to get into any wars. And of course, the exact opposite too. But things like that. And so this is definitely one of those episodes where it's like, okay, they're dealing with a race that is to the extreme of not wanting to do any harm. And so that takes here's where you see Kirk's negotiation skills,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
I think we talk very heavily amongst us Trek fans, right? Very heavily about Picard's negotiating skills. Cisco's negotiating skills needed a little bit of work at times,
Yeah.
like he
Yeah.
was more like a take it by force if need be kind of thing. Janeway, I just felt like Janeway had some pretty good negotiating skills. For the most part, she always tried to reach out a hand and be nice and cordial and everything. I feel like, and maybe I don't know if you feel like this, Chris, but I kind of feel like sometimes we overlook Kirk's negotiating skills and his abilities to do that. Maybe part of it is because Toss only got three seasons versus 7 seasons from some of the other '90s Trek series, but I kind of feel like it's overlooked. I don't know. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I do. Kirk has Kirk has great charisma, right?
Yeah.
And he he comes into the situation and it's like, this is who I am. And he not only has great intellect, but he combines his intellect uh, with his emotional intelligence as well, right? So
Right.
he combines those, and great credit to William Shatner to be able to combine those into the character. But that's why he comes in knowing knowing what the decision should be intellectually, but but being able to control and react or respond to the situation with his charisma. And I think, that is, wow, that's great. I think one of Kirk's great strengths and
Yeah.
qualities as a captain, right? So
Yeah. I mean, he's such a well-rounded captain,
yeah,
right? And I know, we've had these discussions before, Chris. We're going to get to it eventually about where and when we have this episode idea that I think we've mentioned on here before, right?
yeah,
That we're going to do eventually. It's just a matter. We're trying to figure out the best place and at the right time to do it. But an episode idea called something to the effect of like, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." And what we really want to do here is we want to take different moments, different scenes, different events that the different Trek captains have been, and we're specifically kind of focusing on the classic Trek captains. So you'd have tossed through Enterprise, so the five original captains, and looking at some very unique situations that they've been in, and then plucking them from that situation and putting them into another captain situation, saying, "Well, okay, hang on a second. For example, if Cisco had been in Picard's shoes in Best of Both Worlds when they met the Borg, what would he have done?" Right? Or take Archer and put him in the situation during the Dominion War, or the moment in the Pale Moonlight, right, where Cisco basically lies his way to get the Romulans into the war. Would Archer have done the same thing?
yeah,
So I think it's a really unique idea, and we're really looking forward to doing that episode down the road. But we've got some work to do, and we want to put a lot of elbow grease behind this one because it's got a lot to it. But
yeah,
this particular episode, though, Chris, here in this first scene of Mirror Mirror, made me think of this. Like,
yeah,
okay, so what would Cisco have done? What Picard would have done? Would he have done the same thing, kind of negotiate and be diplomatic, and be like, "Oh, well, just think about it and let us know"? Would Cisco have come in and been like, "Damn it, you're giving me those dilithium crystals. I need them," and take
yeah,
off and run? Or I started to think about what other captains would have done in this particular situation with the Hawkins.
yeah, exactly. I think Picard would have been, so the Hawkins would have said, no, we're not going to give it to you. And Picard would have been very, very respectful, very nice, but also very stoic, because Picard's kind of stoic, but he
Yeah.
would have been very respectful. Kirk was just so likable in the moment. Because they said, we're not going to give it to you. And Kirk's like, I admire your ethics, and he gives them this just great friendly smile, and that's Kirk. you know, he's just he's in the situation. He's very, very people are just
Oh,
I think
Chris,
drawn.
I lost you there.
Oh,
I
there, am I
lost you
back?
there.
Am I back
Yeah.
now?
You froze, which means I probably froze on my end. So I'll edit this part out. But go ahead, continue. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I think it's yeah, Kirk has that, like you said, he has that charisma, right? That
yeah,
ability to play it. So it's interesting, like what you said, where Picard would be more stoic.
yeah, yeah. I love just Kirk giving the smile. He's like, okay,
Yeah.
he's very, very, very likable. So they're in the midst of them talking to the Halkins. They are in an ion storm, and after they kind of learn, well, it's time for us to leave. Um, they do the beaming up and in up to the Enterprise, and there's some interference from the ion storm, and that's the catalyst of how they switch and they end up beaming to the Terran Empire, the other side, the mirror universe Enterprise. And so that's how it happens. And when they beam to that new Enterprise, it's a great scene, right? Because we've got the Spock, the mirror universe Spock greeting them in the transporter room. And we've got the transporter operator that gets blamed for what we think is the transporter malfunction.
Yeah, wasn't that was it Lieutenant Kyle
Yeah.
or Chief Kyle? Yeah, the transporter. Yep.
Yeah. And so the method of like in we see very quickly the method of any incompetence or any mistake that someone might do on this starship. They get punished very quickly by, I think, a
Yeah.
device that's called the agonizer. And
Yeah,
so
they get zapped.
so
Yeah, it's very. Did you find this interesting, Chris? So in other mirror universe episodes in the Star Trek franchise, right? They get transported to the mirror universe and they appear as themselves. In this episode, when Kirk and the rest of the landing party get transported into the mirror universe, all of their clothes also change.
yeah, that was
You
great.
know, like they went to a mirror universe and all of a sudden their clothes changed. That part I was like, why would the transporter change their clothes? How would the transporter know to change their clothes? I kind of feel like it would have been maybe a little bit more, maybe a little better if it hadn't changed their clothes and they had transported in their normal Starfleet uniforms. But then the mirror universe people wouldn't believe that they are
Mhm.
their mirror selves.
Yeah.
So I guess that from that regard, you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense then.
I love the Terran Empire uniforms. They're 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 very outlandish, right? And Kirk's uniform, right? I think he doesn't have sleeves, so he's just got
Yeah.
the
Yeah, no,
crossover
Hura's
there.
got like
Yeah.
a belly, like this two-piece thing that she's
Yeah.
wearing, and it's really weird.
Yeah. And they've got the daggers and
Spock's got this like professor like outfit with like the ascot coming in and like the I don't know, the under thing. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
yeah. Yeah. So that was great. I think they did a great job with the costumes, honestly. And
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Iconic. I mean, you think about all the Star Trek conventions I've been to, you almost always see at least one person, at least one, but there's usually many um, that are cosplaying as Mirror Kirk, Mirror Spock, Mirror Uhura, Mirror Sulu. There's a lot of Mirror Universe from this episode, from this
Mhm.
Toss episode, cosplay. So it definitely has had a profound effect on the franchise and has been very influential to people. And it's definitely been a fan favorite episode.
Yeah. Even the
I mean,
symbol of the like the Earth symbol, you've got the Earth symbol and you've got the dagger coming down vertically through it. I mean, we still see that even in the modern Star Trek series that we've gone on. So that symbol
yeah,
has definitely endured for like a great while. So it's been
yeah,
been
yeah.
excellent.
We see it in DS9 Enterprise and Discovery.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very, very different. It's very different than the Starfleet symbol, right? The Starfleet symbol has got the stars in the background, and the kind of like the wreath thing coming up the side. This is this is just Earth with a dagger. It's like very, very different.
Yeah, it is. So we get Kirk and Uhura and McCoy and Scotty, and it just takes them a little bit of time to realize, uh-oh, where are we? We're not in a good place right now, and
I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, Toto.
Yeah. And so they find a way to get away, right? They're able to go to sick bay or some way
Yeah, I think it
somewhere
was sick
away,
bay.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that McCoy can examine them, but really so they can talk in private. But along the way, um, we get the reactions of all the other crewmen and the officers kind of greet the captain as they go on, right? They greet him with a very militaristic and fascist kind of greeting. So that's kind of very, very interesting to see. And we get to see them kind of understand. I think it's Kirk that actually theorizes like, hey, could the conditions of the ion storm created a circumstance where we were transported to a mirror universe, and Kirk and Scotty kind of have the computer help them through that. And once they understand that, yep, that's the circumstance they're in, and that's what's caused it, they start devising their way of how are we going to be able to get out of that. And there is a way to get out of it, right? They have to use the warp engines. They have to do some finagling, and Scotty has to help, and McCoy has to help too. And McCoy gets to have one of his lines. He says,
Yeah.
he says, "I'm a doctor. I'm not an engineer."
Right.
Someone tells him, "Well, you're an engineer today."
Yeah. Right.
So that was good. And so they spend much of the episode trying to do the modifications to the Terran Empire version of the starship so that they can get out and they can beam out. So, but along the way, we get to meet some really interesting takes on the characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much different than they are in the Prime universe.
Yeah. Sulu and Chekhov, I think, did an awesome job. Sulu has that scar like around him. He is he's pretty slimy. Yeah.
Yeah. When he goes after Uhura on the bridge and is all like, trying to make moves on her, and she's looking at him like, get away from me. And he says something to the effect of like, when the what is it, when the cat's away, the mice will play, or the captain's not here. Oh my.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And
she's just like, you slimy, that's just, yeah. I mean, of course she knows it's not her Sulu, right? So
yeah. But that's a very like interesting take on Sulu. That is the dark side of Sulu. So I thought that was great. And Chekhov tries to assassinate the captain, I believe, in this.
Yeah, I mean, I remember from what I just watched it earlier today.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where they're gonna fire on the Hulk homeworld, right? Because they wouldn't give him the dilithium.
Yeah.
And so they're about ready to fire, and Kirk says, "Nah, hold that, belay that. We're gonna give him 12 hours," and blah blah. And Spock's like, "You do realize, Captain, that this is a direct, violation of our orders from the Empire or whatever, something along those lines, right?" And so Spock has him escorted off, and then Chekhov comes out of the turbo lift, and there's actually a quote that he says that I found very fascinating, where he comes out and says something to the effect of like, it's if you die, everybody moves up one and everything. And it's Kirk even notes this later, when he says, "I command an enterprise where officers apparently employ private henchmen among the crew, where assassination of superiors is a common means of advancing in a rank," which is interesting because it's kind of like a pirate philosophy, right?
Yeah.
You think about what we know of pirates, or at least, I mean, even Hollywood's done this too with pirates, but like what we know of pirates and the idea of, well, if the captain ain't cutting it, then they mutiny and they take over and someone else becomes it. And the captain's, killed or kicked off the ship, whatever. And now the next person's risen up that rank to take over that position.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing here. In fact, in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, they do kind of the same thing with, on the ship. Not with the Guardians themselves, but with Michael Rooker's character. Excuse me, the blue guy. I can't remember his name off the top
Oh
of my
yeah.
head. Yeah, exactly.
I want to say like it's not venue. It's
No, it's like I can't remember his name. Anyways, they do something similar to that, right? And so you get Taserface that's going to be the new captain, and Rocket just gives him somebody Taserface. Oh my gosh, Taser's going to be scared of Taserface. Anyways, so you get this idea, right? That this is not a new concept that Star Trek is introducing into science fiction or anything for that matter. This is something that has been around for a long time. But I found it very fascinating. You have someone like Chekhov, right? This is at the time a little bit of a smaller character, and he's a bit of a soft-spoken guy, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, here he is pointing a gun at the captain, ready to take him out, until this one dude decides that he's going to defend Kirk in order to maybe help himself out and maybe catch the eye of the captain. Maybe the captain will take favor on him.
Nice. Yeah, this is all good. I mean, Kirk is in this now. He's in this dilemma because when he was on the Halkin planet, right? He was saying, we're not going to hurt you guys. But now he's in this mirror universe. He's on this mirror universe starship, and the dilemma is Starfleet's ordering him to destroy now they're ordering him to destroy the Halkins.
Yeah, the Terran Empire is. Yeah,
the Terran Empire is. Yep. And if he doesn't, because after a while, he's kind of delaying it. But if he doesn't destroy them, then he's gonna get killed.
Yeah.
So now he's in a dilemma on trying to pause or delay that so the Halkins don't get killed. Plus, he doesn't necessarily want to hurt anyone that's on the Terran Empire version of the Enterprise either, right? Because we've got Spock's character kind of essentially telling Kirk this, like, hey, these are my orders, Captain, and if you don't kill the Halkins and by such and such time, then I've got to kill you.
Right.
So you get to see this neat bit of Kirk kind of maneuvering around this, and so I think that's great. We also see that Kirk has this the Terran captain. When Kirk goes to his quarters, he has essentially a girlfriend,
a concubine.
Concubine. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. A better way to say that.
Hey, remember when we had Doug Drexler on? He talked about Barbara Luna and having a big crush on her when he was younger, right? Barbara Luna is the actress who played this character.
Yes. Yeah. Marla Marlowe, that I think was the name of the character.
Something like that. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yep. Absolutely.
And then, they spend a good amount of time kind of with their relationship, which I think is good because, she's interested in protecting her position and advancing her position. But she's also confused on, hey, why is Kirk showing so much mercy at this moment in time to everyone?
Could you imagine though, Chris, serving aboard a ship like that, where at any moment they could try to assassinate you, or someone below you would try to assassinate you to take your place? Like the amount of paranoia and constant watching over your back, not being able to sleep. I mean, that would just be, how could the Empire, in this case, the Terran Empire, how could they function? How could any crew function on a ship knowing full well that somebody behind you might come and kill you to get your place?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just that environment would be just unbearable.
Yeah, completely. You couldn't function. You just completely fall apart. Yeah. It would be I want to say the word no bueno. Like I
No,
do.
it would be no bueno. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But totally. So yeah, I like that idea of, his Marla. I'm not sure I have her name right. I just want to make sure I have it right, but we'll find it in a little bit. But I like that idea of, yep, there's a captain's like concubine, like essentially, and um, and that relationship, that they have, because she wants to help him. Um, and we learn that he's got this device that has essentially made him get to the position that he has, at least the savage version of Kirk. It's in a device to essentially eliminate all of his enemies. So I thought, oh well, that's pretty interesting. And he got that device, I think, from an alien. That's what she mentions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was pretty interesting. But Kirk, the prime version of Kirk, of course, is not interested in hurting anybody, so he's not going to hurt anyone with that device. So that was good. And he was the prime version of Kirk was very much about um, making her feel better about herself, because she says, "Hey, if I'm not the captain's woman, then I'll go find someone else. I'll go to another commander, or I'll go to another captain, and I'll go through all of the different officers." And he's very much about, I felt, he's very much about kind of, no, bringing her back up and saying, no, you could be anything you want to be.
Yeah.
And that takes her back. She's like, who is this? Who is this person? So
The character that you're referring to, the
Mhm.
Kirk's concubine in Mirror Universe, is Marlena Moreau was the
Marlena.
character name. Yeah, played by the beautiful Barbara Luna.
Nice,
Yeah,
Marlena.
Marlena Moreau.
Marlena Moreau.
Yep. So pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And we see her at the very end of the episode too, because she's actually
She's new on board the ship, and
right.
Kirk's like, "Oh, I think I could be friends with her. Hello." And he goes and like walks, like as the credits are rolling, he's walking
Yeah.
over to her like, Oh, I'm gonna pretend like I got to come over here and look at the clipboard
I
again,
know.
and kind of creeping over her shoulder there a little bit, like, yeah, you're the captain of the ship, man. I don't think you're probably not supposed to fraternize with the lieutenants.
I know. That is so
Like,
Kirk. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, Kirk was a ladies' man.
Yeah.
That was his thing. Picard was not a ladies' man. Cisco wasn't either. He was a father, right?
Yeah.
Archer really wasn't. He kept himself kind of at bay, and of course, Janeway was a woman. That wasn't her thing either, as far as men and stuff. So Kirk was the captain that liked the ladies, especially those alien ladies. Different color skin, green, purple, blue. He didn't care. He liked them all.
He was he was a he was a diplomat. He was a diplomat as well.
Yeah, that's true. I guess he felt, yeah.
Yeah. So so that was great. That was great. I'm jumping around a little bit here, but I want to talk about there's a big fight scene that they had in, oh, I think this is where Sulu came in. Um and Sulu's now like, hey, I'm gonna be captain. I'm gonna kill you. And they have this.
It was in the med bay too, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Because
I think.
Spock was laying on the bed on the bed, and McCoy basically says like, "I'm not going to let him die, Jim. Like, whatever. And he's like, "All right, you got 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever." He's like, "I'll be there, I promise," or something. But yeah,
Yeah. So I love the
Tulu
fight.
comes in. Yeah,
Yep, Sulu comes in, and I love the fight scene, and I love the style of the toss fight scenes.
the
And
Kirk chop.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and the signature, because Kirk has the signature fight moves, right?
Oh yes, it's the same ones. It doesn't matter who he's fighting, how big or how small they are. It's the same ones. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and I love like seeing that, because those fight scenes are a lot of fun. I think, yeah, and um and you're right, they do. I think Spock gets hit over the head with it looked like a skull or something like
Yeah,
that.
like some kind of porcelain thing, maybe
Mhm.
shaped like a skull. And
Yeah,
Kirk was the one that I believe did it, right? Because
yeah,
he was trying to save, I think it was McCoy or somebody, from getting hurt because Spock had mind melded McCoy, right? So
Yeah, that's right.
yep.
That made me. So when I saw that, you're right. When I saw Spike, when I saw when I saw Spock mind meld
We've watched Star
McCoy,
Trek before, I promise.
yeah. So that made me think of a trivia question, right?
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, I was like, where the question was going to be something like where was the first time ever that Spock did a mind meld with McCoy?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, the Random Redshirt podcast is proud to be the supplier of trivia questions for the Shuttlepod Show. If you didn't know that, we do. If you've watched the Shuttlepod Show, you know that because they typically will mention us when they're doing trivia, which is always appreciative that they do that for us. We very much appreciate that, and we love making trivia questions for the Shuttlepod Show. It's really great, especially when we can stump Mark and then Dominic and Connor and the guest win. That's always great. So if Mark, you're watching this, then we love to play Stump Mark. And actually, Chris, the questions that you helped, I think you did most of the questions actually for the James Darren episode. They stumped Mark pretty good, man. Those are some good questions.
Nice.
Yeah, those are some great questions. So, Mark, if you're listening or watching, we like to stump you.
we will try. Yeah,
we'll try. That's right. It's hard. He knows his stuff, but we'll try.
Yeah. What was a cool thing about this episode where we learn about a little bit about the Terran Empire version of Kirk. In it. So we see the Terran version of Kirk, Terran Empire version of Kirk on the Prime version of the Enterprise, and we don't see a lot of them because they're pretty much in the brig.
Yeah.
But we see him, and he's a very angry man, and.
Yeah. Like, what happened to you when you grew up in that alternate universe, man? Dang.
Yeah. And
but I guess it'd be the upbringing, right? I mean, if this Terran Empire, he had to, I'm sure, in order to become a captain of the Terran Empire ship, he had to go through some sort of training, and basically in this particular instance, the way things are configured, he probably was indoctrinated from a very early age, right? I mean, from what I can remember, the Terran Empire, they tend to believe they're better than everybody else, right? Like it's Earth for Earth kind of thing, and they believe that they're better than pretty much everybody else. And so that probably has a big effect on their egos, right? And they're this idea that they have to conquer, right? There's a lot more of this when we get into the few Mirror Universe episodes from DS9. We'll really talk about this, but that sheds more light, which I think is good. It sheds more light on kind of why people in the Terran Empire, or why the Terran Empire is the way it is, and what they believe, and how that affects the things that they do, and the conquering that they do as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Because Kirk actually, to become captain on the ISS Enterprise, the Terran Empire version of Enterprise, he assassinated Captain Christopher Pike. So that was a great bit of, I guess, fact to learn about that version of Kirk. Because no matter where Kirk is, whether he's the Prime version of Kirk or the Terran Empire version of Kirk, Kirk is an extremely ambitious individual, right? He wants to get to where he wants to be, and he's gonna try and do all that he can to be there.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, how's that? Is that better?
Yep.
So he in the Terran version, in the Terran version, he has that device, right, to kind of eliminate all of his adversaries. But in the Prime version of Kirk, he just tries to, I guess, outsmart and out. No, he cheats. He cheats with the Kobayashi Maru. Yes. So I jumped around there a little bit about Kirk, but that's just how ambitious he is.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at both the Prime and the Mirror Kirk, and actually if you look at all the characters, really, they do share some traits, right? I mean, because they are the same person, but there's many things and factors that attribute to why they are so different, right? But at the end of the day, the characters still share something.
Yeah.
And so there are certain attributes, and I think you're right. That's a good point that you make there, Chris, that, you know, with Kirk, he still has that ambition. So regardless of whether he's evil Conqueror Kirk or he is Kirk, you know, the normal one we know from the Prime universe, he still shares some of those particular attributes that we know. Same thing with Spock too, right? I mean, you see that at the end of the episode when Kirk's trying to plant the seed of, hey, you know, it just takes one person to start a revolution. You see the logic come through. So while he is much different than the Prime Spock, he still shares that logic-based ideas and thinking to a certain extent that the Prime Spock does.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important thing I think you noted about Kirk, and it also carries over to some of the other characters as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And because it seems like for Vulcans, whether in the Prime universe or the alternate universe, they still base their logic is still extremely important to them. So they still base their society like around logic. So you have, even though they're very different, excuse me, very different, the Spocks, they are consistent in a way because they're still using logic as a basis of how they act.
Right.
So Kirk uses that, right? Kirk uses that to his advantage.
Against him.
Yeah,
a little bit. Yeah. That's true.
And Spock actually kind of helps them beam off. Like at the end, you know, Spock is like, "Oh, I want my captain back. I'm going to beam you guys back to your universe so I could get my captain back to my universe." So
that, I think too, he realized it's the right thing to do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're not meant to be in those locations, and he realizes, yeah, I need to do this to get my captain, and you need to go back to your place and everything, versus just killing this guy, right?
Yeah.
And I think he realizes that they need this transporter cycle to happen again in order for him to get his captain back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did find it interesting too, because there is a scene where they put who is it? Is it Chekhov, or there's somebody that they put in this agonizer, this machine,
Chekhov.
right?
Yeah. Chekhov.
Yeah, Chekhov gets put into this it's like a torture machine, basically, right? It's like a giant agonizing device, a torture machine. And I believe part of it's because, you know, he's not able to take Kirk, right? And so he gets punished for it, and it's pretty severe. So they're definitely dealing with this idea of torture.
Yeah.
Right. Which, if you think about it, okay, think about the time period in which TOS occurred, late 60s. So you think about Vietnam War, think about prisoners of war, you think about Geneva Conventions, you think about torturing and waterboarding, all these things that might have been going on at that time period in the real life. And now they're addressing something like that. They're addressing this idea of, you know, this idea of torture, this idea of agony and making people suffer for really no good reason. So I found that kind of fascinating, how in especially because you really have to put it into perspective. When you're talking about Star Trek, it doesn't matter if it's TOS or any other series, you really have to look at what's going on in the real world, and because that affects the writing, and especially in TOS. I think of all the series, TOS especially, what was going on in the 60s and all the stuff that was happening in the United States and around the world affected the way they wrote things, right? The way they snuck these topics and themes and ideas in to discuss that they couldn't normally talk about on television, but they put it in the future in space, and then they could. You know, in other Star Trek series, TNG and on, they didn't really have to hide it. They could just come out and talk about topics and not have to worry about that. Not the case in TOS. So you got to give credit to these writers that you mentioned at the beginning, Chris, where they were able to bring some of these topics and conversations and things in to make the audience think through, like, okay, you know, these things are going on in the real world. Let's talk about them and how they would affect people in this particular time period.
I love that you brought all of that up. That's awesome, Zach. Yeah, because I was thinking about, right, you were in the we're in the 60s, and I know that there were university kind of experiments. It might have been around that time, but so we're in the 60s, we're coming out of 15 years, 20 years or so, coming out of World War II, and all of the atrocities of there. And in this episode, we've got these things like like fascism, and what it is to kind of come up in a society where fascism is the thing, and like how would you actually like develop. I know there's a famous like university experiment where they test like how would individuals behave, how would they react, where there's the potential that they might get hurt. Would they push a button that causes pain for someone else? Would they push a button where it would shock someone else, where it would potentially kill someone else? And yeah, and I think in a lot of those cases in those experiments, the test candidates would actually shock those people. They weren't actually people they were shocking, but they would shock people to cause you know a lot of harm to them. So that was a fascinating thing, from those. And when you think about like fascism and World War II and things like um, that they started instituting like Hitler's Youth and bringing up children in this environment and developing this environment, how would that development affect people? And and I love the name of this episode, because the name of the episode is called Mirror Mirror in Mirror Universe, right? But Mirror Mirror, when you think about it from a perspective of we are looking at a reflection of ourselves, that reflection of ourselves could be a reality, and is part of us, and that dark potentiality is within all of us, and we have to recognize that. So I this episode is a lot of fun. It's just
Yeah.
it's fun, but I love that you can go to these different places and explore those kind of different ideas and those different themes. Um, because Mirror Mirror, exactly that. It's exactly that. You're looking at a reflection um, of something that is potential, like in you. And Kirk's ambition. We were talking about that. That ambition is a core characteristic of who he is, and that ambition can come out in a very positive way, or it can come out in something like very, very horrific.
Yeah, you just made me think about that, about this. So you mentioned this idea, right, of like the idea of indoctrinating children, grooming, that kind of stuff. And it made me think about, okay, in this mirror universe, right, you have the Terran Empire. It's very obvious that people like Kirk, Uhura, Sulu, these mirror characters, they were indoctrinated from a very early age, right? They grew up in this society, this fascist, whatever society they've grown up in. And we look at the impact of that and how that affects who they become. Because like you said, right, it's mirror, mirror, looking at ourselves, a reflection of ourselves. And we think to ourselves, oh, well, I would never do these things. And sitting in the way we are right now, well, I would never do that. I would never do this. I couldn't even possibly imagine doing that. But what happens if you take yourself and you grow up in a different environment? Maybe you would. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Maybe you would.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's a good opportunity to reflect and say, we are a part of us. We are a reflection of our environment.
Yeah.
Our environment has a very real effect on who we become. And so this is very apparent by the two different Kirks, the two different Spocks, and so forth. And I loved what Kirk says to Spock as he's planting this seed in Spock's head, right? To say, basically trying to get him to stop this madness and get him to go against the grain and try and change, make changes, right? Wholesome changes. He says, be the captain of this enterprise, Mr. Spock. Find a logical reason for sparing the Hulkins and making it stick. And make it stick. Push till it gives. You can defend yourself better than any man in the fleet. And he even says that he's so hell bent on trying to stop the Empire and change the future in this universe, alternate universe or mirror universe. He even tells Spock, he says, in every revolution, there's one man with a vision.
Yes.
So a couple of really good quotes, I thought, as Kirk's trying to get Spock to see, what he's getting at, right? This idea that, this isn't right. You have the opportunity, Spock, to take command of this and make changes and, start this revolution, right? This revolution against the Terran Empire. And we'll look at what the Terran Empire looks at, 100 years later ish in DS9 at another time when we get into our spotlight on those mirror episodes. But I found that very, very fascinating. And I find it fascinating too, because as we said before, this episode spurs an entire alternate universe within the Star Trek franchise that we revisit in DS9. We revisit in Enterprise. We revisit in Discovery. And even in what I would call the same thing I call the Star Wars books, the expanded universe Star Trek novels.
Yes.
Because we know in the expanded universe Star Trek novels, we know Trip didn't really die. And we know many other things, but there's actually quite a few mirror universe books that are out there that kind of are either plays off of these episodes that are already written, or they're in addition to these episodes that provide more stories and more information. And I believe there was a set of comics, and I don't know if they're still being made, but there was a run of Star Trek IDW comics that did an expanded, like a mirror universe. Was it called like Shattered Mirror or something like that? And I remember the very first comic. It was like on the free comic book day that the comic book stores do. And so it wasn't like a full comic that had like a complete story. It was more like a teaser of it, right? But on the cover, you had the bridge of the Enterprise D. You had Picard, which I think he had a goatee. Of course, he's still bald. He had he had like a Starfleet uniform with cut off sleeves.
Yeah.
Right. But it wasn't like Kirk's. And then you had Data on there, I think, but he looked different. I mean, it was definitely a mirror universe, but it was TNG mirror universe because from what I can remember, Chris, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the TNG crew visits this alternate universe. They do visit other alternate universes and some other episodes, like All Good Things and stuff, but they do not visit, I believe, this particular version or this particular mirror universe.
I believe you're correct. Yeah, I don't recall that in TNG. I don't recall it in Voyager either.
I know.
Yeah. I know there's some other parallel things in Voyager, but not this.
But not this particular mirror universe. Yeah. So that's really interesting. So if you are watching or listening this, I would highly recommend you go out and Google or go on eBay or whatever and look for some of these Star Trek mirror universe books or mirror universe comics, because they really help kind of grow and expand upon this particular mirror universe we're talking about that gets its start in this original series Star Trek episode.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be, yeah.
No, go ahead.
It's going to be fun to talk about those other series that visit the Terran Empire. Like when we get there, like it'll be fun to talk about DS9 and Discoveries. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. It really adds on, to those things. So it should be a lot of fun. This particular episode, Chris, did you have any favorite either moments or aspects of this episode that stood out to you just overall?
Yeah, it was very, very short, but it was after Kirk gives that great speech to Spock. and Spock is beaming them away, and Spock says something to the effect of, "I shall consider what you said,
Yeah.
Captain." It was something like that. But the reason why it stood out to me is like a lot of what you said, because Kirk recognized Spock's connection to logic, and Kirk's Kirk's ability to use, I'll use the word charisma again, his ability to use charisma in appealing to Spock, because Kirk has this, he's also got emotional intelligence here, but he's in a way using an emotion, but he's appealing to Spock because he knows these kind of core characteristics of who Spock is. So he appeals directly to that. So I like that connection with them is still there, no matter what universe they're in. That stood out to me. And then earlier in the episode, when when Kirk is talking to the Halkins, and the Halkins say, "Well, you could just force us to give you the dilithium," and it was just a very small, like split second, like moment. But he turns around and he smiles at them and says, "But we're not going to do that." Those, and I know they're both having to do with Kirk, but and I've talked about Kirk a lot here, but those stood out to me. I think they're very small, but those stood out to me in this episode. Like,
Yeah, it goes back to what you said, the idea of
yeah,
this charisma that Kirk has,
yeah,
right? I mean, you understand why many, not everybody, but many believe he's the greatest captain in Starfleet history.
mm-hmm.
We had a little taste of that by that little Easter egg they put in Picard season 3, did we not? I mean, it's
Yeah,
kind of a reason why he was put there, right? So
yeah, yeah. How about you? Moments that stand out to you?
yeah, like I'd mentioned, the speech that
Yeah,
Kirk's giving to Spock, right? He's appealing to the logical side of Spock, because I think it's a really great point you made, Chris. He knows there's this, regardless of universes, there's this connection between Kirk and Spock, right? I mean, Kirk and
mm-hmm.
Spock are like bacon and eggs, peanut butter and jelly, right? They go together. They have this connection that spans the course of space and time, and no matter what, it works, it matters. And so that idea that Kirk is appealing to Spock and the logical side to him, he's getting Spock to use his brain and really think through it and say, he wants him to realize, if you think about it, what I'm telling you is logical. It makes sense. It can't be anything else. Like what's going on here is craziness. It's crazy. So you have to do something about it. And so I think that was really important, that he did that. Does that have any effect on the Terran Empire and this all mirror universe going forward? That'll be, to be determined. If you've seen the other mirror universe episodes, but we'll talk about that. We'll get into that when we do our next spotlight episode on the mirror universe. But yeah, I mean, what else doesn't? I mean, I kind of like the idea of Spock with a goatee. He looked good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, huh. And there's that funny line at the end of the episode, right, where McCoy's saying some of the effect of, yeah, I kind of liked him with the facial hair, the beard or whatever, goatee and all this stuff. It kind of gave him a little bit of character and stuff that was missing. And Spock comes back with some quip, and I don't remember. I didn't write it down, but it was very funny. And then Kirk's like, I think he was insulting us, and McCoy's like, no, he was basically, yeah, he definitely was, for sure. But yeah, this episode is a classic. This episode is iconic within the franchise. Not only does it launch an entire separate universe that they can go back and visit, and a very, very fascinating one at that. But we get some great costumes, we get some great moments and scenes. And if I was in the shoes of one of those main characters that gets to play a mirror character as well as their prime character, I would think that'd be fun, because now you're getting to really, really stretch your acting skills, right? And your ability to play this character, right? This character isn't, I won't say one dimensional, but you're not just playing the same type of a space exploring, follow the rules, be good and everything kind of person. Now you get to play kind of an evil side. And I know from watching interviews and reading interviews and stories and stuff like that, and even stories at conventions, the actors always say that they love playing the villains more than the heroes because the villains are more fun to play than the hero. So, and I think we definitely see that in DS9. And we'll get into that when we get there. But in this, if I was one of the main cast members, I would love to play a mirror character like this because it gave me the opportunity to really like do some fun, creative things with it. And I think you saw that with Sulu, especially, right? When he goes and sits down on the console next to Uhura and she's all like, "Oh, what are you doing, creep?" And he's like, when the mouse is cat's away, the mice will play. Ha ha ha, whatever. So I thought that was pretty cool. But this is an awesome episode. Obviously we're not breaking any new ground here. This people know this episode. They cosplay as Mirror Kirk and Mirror Spock and Mirror Uhura, Mirror Sulu all the time. But it's an important one within the franchise. And like we mentioned, Chris, this does address some things. This does do what Star Trek does best, which is tell stories and address topics that are not always the easiest and the most comfortable things to discuss.
Yeah. Very well done, very entertaining. And look, we're still talking about it, 50 years plus.
After. Yeah, almost 60 years later. I mean, it's 2023, and in a few more years, Star Trek will be celebrating its 60th anniversary, which is insane. This year, I think, is 57 years. So yeah, in like 3 more years, it's a big 6-0 for Star Trek, which is nuts.
Yeah.
So yeah, all right. Well, this has been a great little first dive into our Spotlight series. For those of you watching or listening and have been watching and listening from the beginning, we of course thank you. And those of you who are new to our podcast, we also thank you very much for coming on and giving us a try and listening to what we have to say. So regardless of whether you've been listening for a long time or this is your first time listening, this is a new series for us. And we're doing, like I said in the beginning, a mini series within a mini series. Well, maybe it's not a mini series, right? But it's a mini series within a sub series that we're doing, called Spotlights and Spotlight episodes. And so this first one we thought was very fitting to do on Star Trek, the original series Mirror Mirror, which started a lot of things. So yeah, I look forward, Chris, to our next Spotlight episode coming down the road. We have so many great things lined up. Yeah. We really hope that you have enjoyed this start to season 5. I mean, we had Elizabeth Dennehy on with us, who kicked off season 5 in our season 5 premiere, and we hope you enjoyed that interview. If you haven't watched it yet, be sure to go down below and watch it or listen to it on wherever you get your podcasts. If you have not done so already, be sure to hit the subscribe button, the like button, and the bells for notifications. If you're on YouTube or if you listen to us on a podcast platform, just hit the follow button, because that will alert you when our newest episodes are out that you can go on and listen to. I think that pretty much covers it, right?
I think
we got the Instagram and the Facebook and the interweb stuff. And
interwebs. Yes.
That's right. Lots of interweb stuff. That's right. So yeah. So Chris, we got so much coming, man. It's going to be this season's going to be a fantastic.
Yeah. This is so much fun. And thank you everyone for around listening to us and being part of this. And if anyone of the audience has any ideas they would like to share or topics they would like us to talk about, we would love to hear them. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you can leave a comment below. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can email us. Just email the Random Redshirt Podcast at gmail.com and we will respond to you. Or you can send us a message on Facebook or Instagram and reach out to us that way. Maybe we should do a poll sometime and get some ideas. We have a lot of ideas, obviously, but as far as Spotlight episodes and things like that, we'd love to hear from you. And we look forward to hearing from you. So with that being said, thank you so much for listening and watching all over the globe here on the Random Redshirt Podcast. We always appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time right here on the Random Redshirt Podcast. Take care, everybody.